There are a couple of different ways to approach doing case reviews. I have a lot of cases come to the office, and sometimes I'll take a look at them without putting any hardware in them. Sometimes I'll build a full system in them as part of my monthly build series and just talk about the results that way. Sometimes I'll do a standalone case review where I'll populate the chassis with some appropriate hardware and then run some testing. But more and more recently, it seems to be that the more accepted practice and the more valid testing methodology is to have a standardized platform that you could use to test your systems with. That way you can compare thermal data from one chassis to another and say all the variables are the same except for the external box. So what I've decided to do moving forward is to use this hardware in all of my case reviews moving forward until something changes, and I'll certainly let you know if that is the case. But this is going to be the very first one that we do, and it's going to be in the Cooler Master NR400. So I want to run through this hardware really quickly and then drop it into the case, do some thermals testing, and see how this case performs. If you've been searching for that final piece for your show build, look no further than Thermaltake's new water RAM DDR4. The low-profile 3200 speed DIMMs look great in any configuration, but the RGB magic really happens when you attach the included custom water block. Compatible with Thermaltake's extensive RGB ecosystem and Amazon Alexa, water RAM is a true eye-catcher that will make your system stand out from the crowd. So check out the link below to learn more. The very first thing you probably notice on this table is that there are 3 different motherboards. Now, of course, we're not using all of them at once, but we generally do deal with 3 different sizes of case when we're doing these reviews. This happens to be a micro ATX case we're going to use, corresponding micro ATX motherboard. This is the Asus B450M Plus Gaming. This is part of their Tough series. If we go smaller than that, Mini ITX is the MSI B450i Gaming Plus AC motherboard, and then full size is going to be the MSI B450 Tomahawk motherboard. So whatever case happens to come in, we'll use the corresponding motherboard, but we'll always use the same processor, which is going to be the AMD Ryzen 7 1700X. I actually wasn't planning on picking this chip up, but I was at Micro Center yesterday and it was $130, which is an absolutely absurd deal no matter what. So as soon as I picked it up and I was like, what can I actually do with this? This is the project that came to mind. It's going to work great in any of our motherboards. We won't be doing any overclocking just to keep everything standardized. And the cooler we're going to be using with it is one of the just standard Wraith coolers from AMD. So no crazy cooling. We're going to use the stock case fans, the stock AMD cooler, and then whatever corresponding motherboard will go into our case. Now, as far as GPUs go, what I originally wanted to do was use the Asus Strix GTX 1070, but that's a really big card. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's very long, it's wide. It probably wouldn't fit in some of the smaller enclosures. For that reason, I wanted to choose something that would definitely fit in even the smallest of cases. And while this isn't the smallest GPU I've ever seen, the Zotac RTX 2060 Mini will fit in every case that I have in the office, and I assume the vast majority of cases that are going to be coming out in the next months or years. So we're going to be using the RTX 2060. It's got a recirculating cooler, which is what we want. We don't want a blower cooler when we're testing thermals inside of a case. So for that reason, I wanted a recirculating cooler, I wanted a small GPU, and the Zotac 2060 Mini fit the bill perfectly. So that's what we're going with. For power, I was going to use this in a build a month or 2 ago. Didn't end up happening because it's ugly. The cables are all ketchup and mustardy, and I just thought, why I don't want to use this in a showcase build, something like a monthly build series build. But for this, it's kind of perfect. This is the Ripjaws PS750G. I think it's 80 plus gold rated, 750 watts, more than enough power. And it doesn't need to be pretty for these kinds of applications, and I'm not worried about anything else, so should be good to go here. The storage we're going to use is an ADATA SSD. It's an M.2 drive that's down there. It's SX8200 Pro. The memory that we're going to use is Team Groot's Vulcan Z. This is a new 3000 speed DDR4 kit, 2x8. Again, we're not going to be overclocking it, so it doesn't really matter that it's not 3600 megahertz or something like that, but it is super low profile, and that's all we really need. So this is the standardized hardware we're going to be using in every case review. Most case reviews are not going to start with this preamble. So because we've used up a lot of time talking about what we're putting in this case, let's just get it in here, and then I'll come back, I'll talk to you about thermals and how the build process went and what I think of the NR400. So not a great way to start our very first standardized case test. Looks like the Wraith cooler, no matter how beefy it might be, for a stock cooler is just not going to cut it. I ran my CPU stress test with everything all put together twice, and twice it not only crashed, it caused the entire system to shut down. And that was with the CPU hitting about 90C. Now, AMD processors don't quite have the thermal tolerance that the Intel chips do, so 90C is probably a little warmer than they want to be, and as a result, the entire system crashed and just shut off. So I don't know for sure if it's this cooler or if it's the case. I don't anticipate that I should be running into this issue the very first time out. So regardless of if it has anything to do with the airflow or the number of fans or the cooler itself, I don't want to start off my standardized case testing run and establishment of a baseline with a failure. So I'm just gonna pop this in instead, and hopefully we come to some better results. And if we don't, then I guess we'll say it's the case, but I really doubt it. So let's just try it. Well, after that small snafu, we have finished up our very first case review using our standardized testing equipment. So because we had all that talking in the beginning, I'm not going to get into a huge amount of detail right now, but here is your build inside the NR400. I'm going to make sure to overlay plenty of B-roll of the case, just so you guys get an idea of how it looks populated with hardware. But overall, I could definitely say I liked it. The build experience in here, especially for a small form factor case, was really, really easy. I have some notes here, so if I refer to these, please excuse me. But the case actually has a significant amount of cable management room around back. Granted, we're not wiring up a hugely complicated system, but I had absolutely no issue with spacing of anything. The one thing that I was worried about was the hard drive cage, which is down underneath the power supply shroud, but it is not only movable side to side, but you could just remove it, and it's just one thumb screw that does it. There's actually 3 different positions you could put it in. One thumb screw, it either moves or it comes out completely. I chose to take it out. I didn't need it. It wasn't going to impact airflow at all, and the power supply is actually a little bit longer than normal, so I wanted to make sure I had plenty of room down here. So took it out, did the build. There is about 1 inch of space behind the motherboard tray for cable routing, which in a micro ATX build should be more than enough. I had absolutely no issue with any spacing. The back panel went on fine. And I guess that's about it for the build process itself. There's plenty of cutouts where you need them. I mean, the case is pretty well thought out. I'll definitely give it that. I do like the fact that the front is full mesh and the top has a removable filter, which I can't remove right now, apparently. Here we go. Magnetic removable filter. If you're using it as exhaust, if you put some fans up here, because right now there's nothing up here. So if you put fans up here pointing out, you don't need this. It will actually restrict airflow a little bit. But I mean, if you don't have fans the way it is as it is right now, or if for some reason you're using the top as intake, this is definitely a good thing to have. The case itself, the way it looks, I think I like it. It's very simple and fairly elegant. I am really starting to dig this kind of half or 3/4 tempered glass panel, which stops at the power supply shroud and doesn't necessarily go over it. There's really no need to have glass down here, I suppose. I mean, you'd just be looking at the power supply shroud anyway, and this not only saves on costs, but it looks kind of interesting to me. Personal preference, I guess, but I do tend to like it. This is kind of the same implementation as on NZXT's H500, and the mounting mechanism for the glass itself, there are a couple of slits down here at the top of the power supply shroud that you slide the glass down into and then move it. It's kind of along a track, and then there's 2 captive thumb screws at the back that are used to secure it. So yeah, the entire build process and the way it came out looking, I'm pleased with. I was a little puzzled by the fact that that Cooler Master included a fan splitter, but it wasn't just a regular fan splitter. It was a Molex powered fan splitter. So the 2 case fans are actually not even plugged into the motherboard. They're just directly piped into the power supply through a Molex connector. Pretty unusual configuration. I haven't built a system like that in a long time. So I'm not entirely sure why they chose to do it that way. That means that the fans are not PWM controlled or voltage controlled in any way. They just kind of run at full speed all the time. So you'll see in the, I guess, the noise test that we did later what the results of that were. All right, dog came downstairs. We gotta hurry this up before he starts barking at me to play. So yeah, Molex fan splitter, a little unusual. So the way I did the measurements on this was I took readings at idle for both the CPU and the GPU as far as temperatures go. Then I put the GPU under load for about a half hour, took a temperature reading, put the CPU under load for about a half hour, took a temperature reading. And then I put them both under load and took a noise reading. So again, right now we don't have anything to compare these to, but I could just talk about what I would expect to see from a case like this, I guess. First, I guess I'll go with the noise. 47.1 decibels from about a foot away was a little noisier than normal, and that probably is as a result of the two case fans just running at 100% all the time. You definitely have the option of plugging them into a motherboard header as opposed to just using the Molex connector, but the way Cooler Master presented it was with a Molex connector and a splitter, so that's what I used. If they actually hadn't provided that Molex connector, I would have just used the motherboard headers, and maybe the case would have been a little quieter. But I assume that your normal consumer is going to see that they provided you this splitter and say, oh, this is what I should be using. So 47.1 decibels, a little louder than I would expect or want, but I guess, you know, this isn't a silence focused case. So CPU idle temps 30 degrees Celsius, GPU idle temp 37 degrees Celsius. Those are both perfectly within reason. CPU load temperature 77 degrees, much better than the complete system shutdown that we were getting with the Wraith cooler. And GPU load temperature 72 degrees. So GPU temperature well within spec, shouldn't be any throttling there. CPU temperature for a Ryzen chip, getting close to the 80s is kind of the danger zone for Ryzen. So we want to see that temperature not go any higher than 77. And after a half hour, it didn't. So that's certainly good. But again, we're talking about something where I have no basis for comparison because this is the very first test. So that's kind of a very brief overview, and I guess maybe kind of a review of Cooler Master's NR400. I do really like the micro ATX form factor. You don't see a whole lot of it anymore. This one, it's not, I mean, it's a fairly compact case, but it's not small. Like there's definitely room inside if you wanted to do something like custom water cooling, if you wanted to add some additional hardware, wanted to add a longer GPU, more fans, something like that. It supports 360mm radiators up front. So if you wanted to go a little harder here, put in something like a 9900K or something like that, this case could certainly handle it. But that's about it, guys. I'm gonna leave it at that, and I hope you guys like the new standardized case testing setup. I hope you guys enjoyed the review of the NR400, and if so, get subscribed, check out the merchandise store for shirts like this, and see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.